The King's Princess and the Witch. There once was a little girl. She lived in the castle, but she was not the princess. Her eyes were gray as her father's, and her hair was bright as her mother's. But she did not know either of them. When this little girl was born, the war of the goblins had just come to an end, and both her parents passed away trying to protect the kingdom. So the king decided to take good care of her, not knowing that this little girl was to become his worst nightmare. One night after dinner, the king sat down with the little girl to read her a story. "Come here, my princess. Tonight I will tell you a story about witches and fairies," said the king. Once upon a time, in a very faraway kingdom lived Marfiria, the queen of the fairies. She was the kindest and most loving girl in the whole world. She loved her people and they loved her. But one night, the witches invaded the kingdom and they trapped all of the fairies to steal their magic dust. He continued as the little girl listened to him. "The witches wouldn't do that, my king," she said. The king frowned with confusion. "The witches are nice and caring. They are just misunderstood by people like you, but not by people like me. I do not understand why you are telling me this, but I suppose you do not know any witch. Therefore, you are not aware of how evil they are." The little girl stood up and fixed her dress to then walk towards the king. "I do know them, my king. The witches talk to me every night and they tell me all the horrible things that you said that they do. But they tell me that you are the one who does those horrible things to them, and I believe them." The king was now furious. "How dare you say those things to me? You're king. You're talking nonsense. And go to bed now. I will continue this conversation once the sun comes out." The little girl smiled and bowed to the king before leaving the room. What the king did not understand was why the girl said those things to him, and he wondered if what the little girl said was true. The darkest of the night came when the clouds covered the moonlight. The wolves began to howl, asking the moon for protection when everyone else was sleeping. The king laid on his bed when a sound woke him from his dream. "Who dares to invade the king's—" "Oh, shut up," interrupted the voice of an old lady. "You always complain about everything, and we never get to complain, so shut up." The king got out of bed and turned on a candle next to him. And there she was, an old lady with beautiful gray eyes and the brightest of the hairs. She was wearing a pink dress that definitely looked odd on her. Her skin was extremely wrinkled, and she smelled like she was rotting from the inside. Then the king realized it was the little girl who he had been taking care of for so long. Yes, I know that you might think that you are crazy or that this is some kind of witchcraft. And let me tell you, my king, it is." The old lady smiled in a way that creeped out the king. How can that be possible? How can the little girl get old so fast? "Who are you really?" "Isn't that obvious, my king? I am who I have always been. The only difference is that you can see me for who I am and not for who you want me to be. And I am only here to teach you a lesson." The old lady walked towards the king slowly. "When the war of the goblins began, you begged for help. You begged everyone on earth for help, and I listened. I had always been listening to you." The lights of all the candles in the room lit up, and the whispers of the wind became screams. You never wondered how the war ended, and you were just happy that it happened. But it was me all along. Then you invited me to your house and treated me like your little girl, like a daughter you never had. But now it is time for you to pay me for all my duties." The witch appeared in front of the king. She grabbed him from the neck and raised him from the floor. "Let go of me," yelled the king with all his strength. "I will not, my king. I will take you with me instead." And just like that, the king disappeared in thin air. The little girl who had always been so nice to everyone turned into the most dreadful creature that could have ever existed. But she took what was taken from her as her payment, the king's life for her favor. The witch walked towards a mirror that stood next to the bedroom's door, to then look at her reflection. She had once again turned into someone else, but this time it was not a little girl. What she saw in the mirror was the pure reflection of the king begging for help. Now the witch was the king. She had his life and he was trapped forever. There was a time where the king thought so poorly of the witches that he did not realize that one of them had been helping him all along. He did not know how important the witches were in his life. But he will be condemned to see it all now from the eyes of the very witch that helped him. The end.